Hey y'all, what's going on? How are my people? Hey, I've got two awesome Bigfoot encounter stories. I think you're gonna find these really interesting. And I'm holding on to the paper here with my right disposable thumb. All right, here we go. This first story is really cool and kind of creepy. I've never heard one like this, and I don't know, it just kind of gave me the willies, but the gentleman who sent it to me wants to keep his name out of it. However, his 9-year-old daughter was with him on this experience. He followed up with an email and asked if I would say hi to his daughter, Sophia, the girl that was with him on this encounter. And I just wanted to say hi to Sophia. Hi, Sophia. How are you? 9 years old. I guess you're in the 3rd or 4th, maybe 5th grade. Hope you're doing well in school. Your daddy's a good writer. Just do everything he says and you'll be fine. So, hey there, kid. I'm glad I'm getting to do your dad's story. All right, let's dive in. He writes, I'm a believer in Sasquatch, even though I have never seen one, but I do enjoy being out in the mountains of Utah as often as possible. Where I live, I have my choice of many canyons within about 20 minutes of my house. Each canyon has a multitude of side roads, back roads, and an endless amount of dense forest. I have a condition that does not allow me a great deal of opportunity to hike. I am numb from the waist down, and my balance is poor. Most of my squatching is done from a vehicle. But that's not to say that I don't get to see a great many different forms of wildlife, and I'm quite familiar with the wildlife in this state. Before my injury, I spent a lot of time in the mountains hiking, fishing, and just relaxing. The night of this particular experience, which was just this summer around the end of August or the beginning of September, two friends of mine, my 9-year-old daughter, Sophia, and myself had decided to take a drive up Pison Canyon shortly around 10 p.m. that night. We had only flashlights, and they were not of the highest quality. We found a little side road and drove in a short distance. Several campers were in the area, so we left, not wanting to disturb them. While we were backtracking down the road, out of the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a large, piercing blue eye shine. This was not a reflection from the headlights. These eyes were self-illuminated. I told my friend to stop the vehicle so we could look closer, and all of us confirmed that we could see them. We all agreed on the distance, and it was about 70 yards. One of the passengers saw more eyes glowing in the darkness. We counted 4 sets of eyes tracking us. These were closer at about 50 yards. I began to run the possibilities through my mind as to what animal this could be. A cougar, they are almost always solitary hunters. A bear, quite solitary again, unless it's a mama and her cubs. Was it a deer? Possibly. As I'm going through this internal checklist, we could see the set of eyes we first saw begin to move. It was flanking us. At this point, I concluded that each set of eyes were 5 to 6 feet from the ground. Switching my attention to the 4 sets of eyes in the other direction, I saw that they were moving back and forth between the trees, but they were not advancing like the other one. They were just watching us. I had no sense of danger or fear. At this point, my daughter tells me that she needs to go to the bathroom. Of course she needs to pee. A 9-year-old girl's timing is always the worst. I told her that I would get out with her and keep an eye on whatever was tracking us, and she could pee right next to the truck. I stood there and watched the woods, and my daughter was ready to get back in the vehicle. Nothing strange happened, but that was the moment that I felt danger or fear. I closed the door after she was in the vehicle and started to close the distance on the watchers. Just a few steps off the dirt road, closer to some nearby trees. let me interject here. He's moving into the woods towards these eyes. Dude, you're braver than I am. My friend Nate got out and went with me. The creatures never moved, and they just seemed interested in us. I found an old broken branch, and I smacked a tree with it. They didn't budge, blink, or make a sound. I then took a small rock and lobbed it into their general direction. And then one of the creatures stood up. Now the eyes were 9 to 10 feet off the ground. My daughter began to get a bit frightened, claiming she saw something large standing on the passenger side of the vehicle up on a small rock outcropping. I realized I had lost sight of the one who had slowly been flanking towards the rear of the vehicle. I couldn't see it anymore. I know children have vivid imaginations, but my daughter's never lied to me except once, and she was very remorseful. I trust her. She was quite frightened, so we made the decision to move along. Nate carries a metal detector with him. It is a hobby. After driving a few hundred yards back down this road, Nate's metal detector started beeping and chirping in the back of the vehicle. We pulled over so that Nate could power down the device. When he says to us, "It was already off. There's no way this thing can beep without power." I heard him pull the whole battery out of the device just to make sure. We had stopped the vehicle close to some RV campers, and someone came out of their RV to see what was going on. I think he thought we were messing with his stuff. We explained that we had just pulled over to shut off a malfunctioning metal detector and that we were about to move along. I took a minute to tell him that we had seen some animals lurking around just over the next hill. And then we drove off and we headed for home. The next day, my friend Trish and I went back to the location to check it out in the daylight. We hiked up onto the hill where we had seen the figures the night before, and we measured at an estimated height of where we saw the eyes after the one creature stood up. The number we got was 8 feet 6 inches. We walked over the top of the hill and into a beautiful ravine of sorts that led to a small stream at the bottom. With my injury, I could not make it all the way down. We were just poking around and we found several tracks in the dirt. Only one well-defined with toes, and Trish took a picture of it. While we were searching the hill, 5 deer approached us. 3 walked within 15 feet of Trish, and another pair got really close to me. It was so cool. The next day, I read as much as I could on local bears, elk, deer, cougars, moose, and any other animal that I thought could have been in the area, none of which matched the behavior, size, or anything else about these unknowns that we saw. Again, the larger predators are solitary and avoid humans. There is no other wildlife I know of or have seen that act like the creatures that we saw that night. I do not claim to have seen a group of Sasquatch because I did not see them clearly. I did, however, see 5 sets of eyes on a very large animal that I cannot explain. Man, I cannot imagine looking at a set. I see eyes all the time around here. I have to come out of the house and go find a dog or put the chickens up or get something out of my car or whatever at night, and I put on a headlamp, and it never every single night that I come out of my house, it's dark around here, and we don't have any street lights or anything. It's just pitch black dark, and no matter where I shine that light, I'll pick up a set of eyes somewhere. Now it's either a possum or a coon or a deer or a coyote or something. But I imagine seeing that and then keeping my light on it, and then all of a sudden it raises up 5 feet. Oh my gosh, that would just blow me away. That would blow me away. And then you've got the issue of the metal detector going off. That is so crazy. That's just crazy. And I know a lot of people are going to say, well, that's infrasound or whatever. Maybe it is. I don't know. Maybe infrasound can turn on electronic equipment. I don't know. But it's such an interesting story, and I really appreciate the gentleman sending it to me, and his daughter Sophia for being a brave girl and hanging with him. All right, let's move on to the next one. This is an email I got 2 or 3 Months ago. The woman who wrote it, her name is Lynn, and she is a great writer. And this is an encounter story, and she took the time to really be creative in her writing, and I think you're going to enjoy this. Cryptid Crime Watch, Sasquatch Security, Bigfoot Bodyguard. I've often wondered what he thinks. That huge shadow we see in the woods outside our kitchen and living room windows. It's a menacing shadow that sometimes looms larger than the creature it conceals. In the gloomy darkness, it appears just inside our tree line. The shadow grows and lengthens. It's an ebony patch in the middle of blackness. It's a distortion of reality. A giant becomes a gargantuan. However, by day, the creature spawning that shadow is just as intimidating. He brings an intense silence, an echoing howl, a wood knock that will make you jump, and a growl that will haunt your nightmares. To those who don't know him, he's a menace, a local legend that's been reported to law enforcement. Frightened hunters and scared fishermen raced trains and intimidated long-distance truck drivers. To the people who occupy the 5 homes clustered around streams on this poorly paved remote section of road in west central Pennsylvania, he has a few other names. We call him Old Man, a term handed down by older neighbors now gone. They called him that because he has been there for as long as they could remember. We call him our Sasquatch security team of 1, Backyard Bigfoot, Bigfoot Bodyguard, and Cryptid Crime Watch. In the 10 years that my husband and I have lived here, I've come to understand a few things that happen. Silence is key to his presence. It doesn't matter the time of year or day. When you go outside and hear nothing but a blanket of silence, that's when you know he's around. You won't always see him, but you will be made aware of his presence. His greeting for me is a tree knock. For my husband, it's a whistle. For the neighbor down the road, it's a sound like purring, and for the children, it's a chatter. If you've been here long enough, you've heard these sounds and you know what they mean. There have been a few times that Old Man's actions have stood out and his intentions have become obvious. A few weeks ago, an incident in the neighborhood prompted a strong police presence. It was my day off, my husband was away on business, and I'd spent the morning doing small chores and getting ready to go run errands. It wasn't until I left the house and drove down the driveway that I became aware of the problem. There were 7 police cars blocking my driveway. One of them occupied by an officer who got out of the vehicle and approached my car. To protect those involved, I'm not going to say what had happened, but let's suffice it to say that the police had reason enough to want me to stay inside. After speaking with the officer, I agreed to turn around and go home. The officer turned to walk away and then stopped, and he came back to the side of my vehicle. "I have a question," he said. "Have your children been outside throwing branches and rocks at the officers and our vehicles?" "No," I replied. "My child is grown and now lives out of state." Then I told him which houses that had children and pointed to those residences. What do you think I would say? "I'm sorry, officer, you've apparently annoyed our Sasquatch, and he's decided to pelt your vehicles with rocks and tree limbs until you leave." No, I couldn't say that, though I did consider it for a moment. However, the officer already had enough evidence that at least one of the local residents was insane. I didn't want him to add me to the list. I turned my car around and drove back up my driveway and pulled into the garage. I got out of the vehicle and walked to the open garage door, and I listened. Total silence blanketed the area. Yep, Old Man was around, making certain nothing would happen without his presence. I heard a single wood knock before closing my garage door. I thought back to an unfortunate morning almost 10 months earlier. It was a few days after Thanksgiving. The leaves were off the trees and I was getting ready for work. The wail of a siren cut through the quiet of the woods and prompted me to go to the living room and look out the front window. Emergency vehicles lined the road, all with lights flashing. My heart sank. My neighbor had undergone serious surgery weeks before, and despite the surgery had received a negative prognosis. I ran from the house to theirs, where Celine, my neighbor, was sobbing and collapsed into my arms. It was an incredibly heartbreaking moment that continued into a heartbreaking day. Hours later, when I returned home, tired, sad, and feeling very weary, I looked into the woods for the confirmation that he was there. Seeing nothing, I stepped onto my back porch and noticed a brown stone that had been worked until it was smooth and shiny laying on the doormat. I looked over my shoulder and heard a single wood knock before I stepped into the house. It wasn't the first time he left the gift of a stone. I believe, and most of my neighbors agree, that stones hold a special significance to him. The other times he's made his presence known, the day a mama bear and 3 cubs crossed the road in front of my vehicle. The day a torrential downpour lasted 4 hours and dumped several inches of water in our area. The mornings I left for work before we had 4-wheel drive vehicles, and I had to park at the road because cars wouldn't make it back our snow-covered driveway. The day hiker had become lost in the woods when police and emergency crews had come to search for her. The gifts he left? Flowers for me and also for the other female neighbors. Shiny, smooth rocks, dead animals, sticks, and I've received a heavier stick that's been worked until smooth and feels oddly heavy. We've decided this is some sort of tool or a weapon. With the exception of one neighbor, we all feed him. My husband and I give him fruit and vegetables that we haven't eaten. I've also thrown him bread, but he doesn't seem to like it very much. He will eat it though. He just leaves most of it behind. A few weeks ago, I placed an entire watermelon just outside in the woods. He ate the whole thing. I know this because he's not at all shy about leaving behind the parts that he doesn't want. I didn't find so much as a small piece of rind. Back to the question I asked at the beginning. What do you suppose he thinks? Does he realize that we are human? Does he consider us his humans? Does he think we're part of the land like he is? That we belong here as he does? I've never gotten any answers, or maybe I have because we found a peaceful way to coexist with our backyard Bigfoot. I doubt there will ever come a day that I don't find the silence he creates unnerving, that his shadow in the woods will not cause a shiver to run the length of my spine, that the feeling of being watched won't leave me a bit unsettled, and when I hear the wood knocks, growls, and other noises he makes, I have a moment of feeling sick to my stomach. Though there is a feeling of security when, on a dark winter night, I arrived home from work and I hear a wood knock before I close the garage door, especially on the nights when my husband's away on business. You see, there's always been another question, one that I hope goes unanswered. What would the old man do if someone came near his home? Okay, I hope you all enjoyed that. Thanks for clicking on the video today and listening this far. Again, it just means the world to me. All right, we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.